We'll say good day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right, thank you. Once again, we thank each and every one of you and all of you together collectively for the co-creation of this interaction. Let us begin this transmission with the title, The Last Days of Atlantis. The reason we are delivering this at this time is because your transition from your October to November month is the anniversary of its destruction. This is why, even though it has turned into something else, turned into a different translation, this is, however, the original reason why you have All Hallows Eve, Halloween, and the idea of All Souls Day and All Saints Day, October 31st, November 1st, November 2nd. The day before the destruction, the day of the destruction, the day after the destruction of Atlantis. That is the original reason for those holy days, in remembrance of that. So let us go back in time, approximately 12,800 of your years ago, or what you typically refer to as 10,800 BC. This was approaching the end of the days of the Atlantis civilization that had existed for many thousands of years. Began when there was the migration of those indigenous peoples in what you call your North and South America, the migration across the continents from west to east, eventually creating the colony of Atlantis in the islands that you now recognize to some degree as the Bahamas and Cuba. Although remember that in those days there was great ice shelves coming down from the north, covering a great portion of North America, and the oceans, having that much water locked into ice, were much lower at the time, somewhere between 250 to 300 feet lower. Thus, revealing, if you even look at your ocean maps today, the outline of the islands as they used to be. The Bahamas now are simply the remnants of what used to be the main island, along with Cuba, of the Atlantean civilization, though they did, of course, spread into North, Central, and South America, and even cross the oceans into what you know as Europe in the Mediterranean and Northern and Western Africa. But even though their so-called empire was vast, the main islands were off the coast now of what you call your North and Central and South America. And many people on your planet at this time, because much of the history was lost, and because most of what you still remember of the idea of Atlantis came through ancient stories from Egypt that were passed along to individuals in Greece and then shared with your modern individuals, you tend to imagine, because these stories came from Greece, that Atlantis had something similar to Grecian architecture. It did not. The closest representation that you have of Atlantean architecture is Aztecan architecture. Large stone blocks, the kind of pyramids that you find in Central and South America. These are the appearances of the kind of structures you would have seen in Atlantean times. And the Aztec architecture that remains is the closest remnant to the idea of Atlantean architecture that still exists on your planet. Now, it did change a little bit when they went over into the idea of the Mediterranean, but it didn't become Grecian architecture. The closest representation is that which you call the Minoan architectures, specifically the Temple of Knossos on the island of Crete. You will see there an ancient Atlantean colony in that temple, which is known as the Labyrinth Temple and the legend of the Minotaur, for the Atlanteans were bull worshippers. So the idea is that they adopted some of the Grecian architecture, but still retained something quite different. For if you look at the architecture of the Temple of Knossos, you will find that the pillars and the structures there are not what you would find in the area you know to be Greece. They are painted differently, they are shaped differently. And it represents more the idea of the Atlantean idea of decoration, being that the pillars are red and black and the stones are white. And if you look at the remnants of the labyrinth that exists in the Temple of Knossos on the island of Crete, you will see that it was actually an initiation labyrinth which came from the culture of Atlantis. For when you follow the traces that remain of the labyrinth that are dug into the ground and lined with stone, you will find at the end of every single turn a large crystal buried in the rocks of the labyrinth. So that at each station there was an opportunity to meditate on those crystals, to resonate with those crystals, and work your way through the labyrinth in the sense of a particular ritual that will allow you at the end to allow your mind to open up to new understandings, new information, new initiations of the cosmos. This came from ancient Atlantean times. Now, in the days before the destruction, which actually covered a very large span of time, for there was a, shall we say, very large master comet that came into your solar system and took up an orbit, an eccentric orbit, that crossed the path of Earth's orbit twice every year. And for a period of time rained down upon the Earth, as the comet broke up, various remnants that would impact your Earth and cause great destruction. These cometary fragments, twice a year, bombarded the North American and Atlantic region for a period of over 2 decades. Every year, twice a year. The obliteration was almost complete of anything that existed in those areas over that span of time, which is one of the reasons why you very, very, very much don't see almost anything left of whatever was in those areas. Imagine being bombarded for over 20 years by cometary impacts in your city. There wouldn't be much left. But it started relatively small, and mostly bombarded the ice shelves and the eastern seaboard of the Americas, many chunks falling into the Atlantic Ocean, causing tsunamis. But there was at one point a greater chunk that came through the atmosphere, the primary body of the comet, that finally penetrated the atmosphere and struck in the Atlantic Ocean, gouging out a crater in the ocean floor, and caused massive tsunamis in all directions, radiating out from the Atlantic, tsunamis at least 300 feet high. This is the obliteration, the final obliteration of the idea of Atlantis, cultures on the eastern seaboards of North, Central, and South America, tsunamis that struck the western seaboards of Europe and Africa and into the Mediterranean. And this is the beginning of your legendary flood of Noah. The idea also is that in those ancient times before the final destruction, since there were many cometary impacts and since they could observe the master comet arcing through the sky before it ever hit, they understood by plotting its trajectory, and especially after some of the fragments began to impact the Earth, that their time was running out. Many of them fled into other areas to preserve their culture, their knowledge, their civilization, going into South America, going into some parts of Central America, going into parts of Africa, parts of Europe, and all the way into the beginnings of the culture that became Egypt, bringing their knowledge, bringing their technology, their architecture into the understanding of what it took to build the great pyramids in Egypt. But before that time, again, in observing this master comet, which still to this day provides what you call meteor showers at certain times of the year, including the time that is coming up now. That was the time of the destruction of Atlantis in its final days. You still find what you call the toroid meteor showers are the remnants of that comet still to this day shooting through your skies. But now, simply the remains are very small and burn up in your atmosphere rather quickly, providing you with a spectacular show, but still acting as a reminder of those days, back when the sign of a comet in the sky and the memory, the civilization's collective consciousness memory of that comet is one of the reasons why comets developed the reputations that they did of being bad omens of destruction. It comes specifically from that comet that destroyed Atlantis. Now, also at that time, the idea, even though the concept of dragons is also something else, also interdimensional beings that present themselves to you in your reality in a certain way that you have called a dragon form, comets also in ancient times were referred to as dragons, for they crossed the sky with their glorious burning tails, and again were akin to the idea of the interdimensional dragons in how they appeared against the stars. So you can see that many different kinds of ideas, many different legends about comets and other things developed from this one experience that began an age upon your Earth that your scientists recognize and have labeled the Younger Dryas period. This shifted your climate radically at that time. And the cometary impacts that impacted the thick ice shelves on the North American continents caused much flooding, much runoff. And that spilled into the oceans over time, raising the ocean levels, so that today you find they are 250 to 300 feet higher than they were at that time, submerging most of the Atlantean islands that existed in the Atlantic Ocean. And again, one of the main reasons why you find it so challenging to find any remnants of that civilization today, although some things do still exist in those areas that you have yet to discover. But let us look at those last days and bring into your imagination the idea of a thriving civilization of beauty, of great pyramidal structures, of great paved streets of stone and temples, painted red, white, black, and sometimes sheathed in gold and silver, and the combination alloy that was known as orichalcum, which contained also copper and mixes of gold and silver in various proportions. And the idea of the beautiful shining crystals that gave light and power to the ancient capital cities of the ancient Atlantean Empire, and that also could be used in understanding their vibration for long-distance communication between the main empire islands and the outposts that existed around the planet. The idea then is to imagine, in those days, the beautiful brown-skinned people walking on those streets and floating above those streets in lighter-than-air balloons, and understanding the idea of the stars and having astronomy and a great understanding of mathematics and a deep understanding of the earth and nature and their part in it, that over time, over eons, became split into those that retained the ancient ways of connection to the earth and those that began to slide down into the idea of fear-based beliefs and the corruption of the concept of the illusion of power. Your psychic, Edgar Cayce, referred to these as the children of light and the children of darkness. For there was this split in Atlantis, as such a split is now even beginning to accelerate in your time. For the idea itself of the Americas is a recounting and a recycling of the idea of Atlantean times, and an opportunity for you to lift yourselves up into a different future and a different path and a different outcome than what it is that they themselves experienced. For they knew they had reached the end of their cycle. And so many of those that understood their connection to the earth, their connection to the stars, began to migrate away from the Atlantean capitals into various parts of the world that they knew would be safe, where they could rebuild, where they could preserve their knowledge in ancient structures such as some of the ancient pyramids, preserve their libraries in Alexandria and in Giza under the Sphinx, and in certain areas of Yucatan and South America and Peru, where some of those libraries still exist today and have yet to be discovered, that would reveal much about the Atlantean times. But thinking back again to those days and knowing that these beings were recognizing that they were coming to the end of a cycle and leaving in great ships, there were those simply that did not believe and did not take heed and perished in the destruction. For some of them, while they were corrupt, some of them simply could not bear to leave their homeland, and knew through their learning and their knowledge, through their understanding of their connection to nature, that there would be an opportunity once again in what you call their future and what you call your present, for them to live out through the idea of reincarnational experiences, those cycles once again, and to look to the light and bring the light with them that would allow for a different, a more positive, a more constructive, a more peaceful, beautiful, and artistically creative outcome, so that in a sense, even though the island itself has sunk, Atlantis may arise again in a new form, in the same basic continent that they had crossed, migrated across to create the colony of Atlantis, the empire of Atlantis, so that it may rise again in the Americas one day. Listen to the knowledge that was preserved of the indigenous tribes of South, Central, and North America, for they contain the information and the knowledge of the rising of Atlantis once more. Allow yourselves to imagine yourselves again connected to those times and walking those streets as the indigenous population that knew the stars and knew the earth in deep ways that you have yet yourselves to experience again, except for perhaps a few of those indigenous tribes that remain on your planet that have kept to the old ways, the ancient ways of knowledge, and know that the cycle has now begun anew, and that you are in those times, not only the end times, but the beginning times, that allow you once again to experience the glory, the beauty, and the grace, gratitude, and appreciation that was paramount in the highest days of the Atlantean civilization. And they did interact with many forms of natural life, in particular, communicating with the dolphins and the whales, many of which were allowed into the temples through great channels, through great ideas of canals, which allowed them to swim right into the center of the pools in many of the temples in Atlantis, so that they could commune together and build the idea of a society of land and sea, and had much knowledge of the idea of the herbs of nature and the foods of nature that would promote healing, and the vibrations that would promote the idea of stability and healing and beauty and health and wealth in the connection to nature that they experienced in those days. Allow yourselves to feel within your own being once again that connection to nature. Let at first, before it appears within the actual physical reality, let at first that feeling, that knowledge, that rising of Atlantis to begin within you, within your spirit and within your soul. and allow it to penetrate deeply within your hearts, and feel the drum beat in your heart that was utilized in Atlantis as a teaching mechanism. For when the drums of Atlantis matched the heartbeat, then they could, through induction, slow down the drum beats and allow your hearts to slow down into a meditative, hypnotic state in which all lessons were given and all lessons were retained, because they were allowed to go into the state in which all information that was given was absorbed easily and effortlessly and retained throughout their lifetimes. The drums of Atlantis are the key to the states of being that will allow Atlantis to rise once again from your hearts, from your souls, from your spirits, and from your bodies, so that it may once again one day begin to appear upon the land that you know as the Americas. It can then spread once again into the lands around the earth, recalling and reconnecting to those Atlantean colonies in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, and all the way back to their history and their legacy that came all the way from Lemuria in Southeast Asia before they crossed the land bridges of the north and the oceans of the south to arrive in the Americas, north, central, and south, and begin their migrations across the continents to create the shining civilization eventually that was Atlantis, which will awaken again, as we say, first in your hearts, in your souls, your spirits, your minds, and your bodies, and finally to physically manifest once again as Earth continues in its evolution of becoming the sixth hybrid race, inviting the ancient connections and families of extraterrestrials that were known in Atlantean times to once again rejoice and celebrate with you on the surface of your world. Rise, Atlantis, rise. We thank you for allowing us to share this energy, this information, this state of being with you this day of your time. And in return for the gift that you have given to us, how may we now be of service to you? Please begin with your questions and dialogues, if you wish.
Hey, what's up, Bashar?
And to you, good day. I am up.
Hi, you're up high, yes. I just wanted to make a comment.
Yes.
There's no question.
That's all right.
After I came home from Iraq, I was in the Army for 16 years. And,
all right.
I was lost.
How exciting for you.
It was, now I look back on it, it was very exciting.
Yes. And have you found yourself?
I have found myself.
All right.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Where
were you when you found yourself?
I was in the living room of my apartment in Koreatown.
All right.
And I had just got laid off my job.
Oh, how exciting.
I know.
And?
And I said to myself, I'm going to draw this unemployment for 6 months.
All right.
And then I heard a voice come through and said, if you don't take time off to do some self-development, shame on you. Ooh. Yeah.
And did you?
I did, 6 years. And I came across my spirit guides, and that voice, I followed the intuition. And it led me through some tools that I needed to gather before I got to you.
Oh, all right. And you will continue on, of course, as well.
Yes. And when I found you, I found myself. I began to, the tools that I learned before I got to you, helped me to vastly and quickly learn, have unconditional love of myself.
All right.
No judgment of any kind of myself.
All right. In the negative sense.
Yes. Forgiveness of myself.
Very good.
And have no expectations of anything of myself.
No insistence.
No insistence.
You can expect to be yourself. You can expect that things will happen and unfold in a natural way, but you don't have to insist or assume what way that will be. Yes?
Yes, you are correct.
I know, that's why I said it. And so you're having more fun?
Oh, life is zooming. I'm like happy, and I'm like
Yes.
integrating with everyone, and I'm not invalidating people's journeys, and I'm just running and I'm running, and I'm like, oh, wow, this life is pretty fun.
You sound a lot like one of us.
Yes. Yes. And I'm happy. That's why I didn't have a question, because
Exactly, because you know how to answer them.
yes, it's like, and you would say to people, are you following your excitement to the best of your